Just 1 second before the. Okay. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. So, welcome to the last day of this program. So, this is the first session. Uh, this is the today's the first session. So, today we have Dr. Rajesh Kumar Tripathi with us. Let me introduce him first. So, Dr. Rajesh Kumar Tripathi has received the PhD degree in machine learning for biomedical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology IIT Guwahati, India in 2017. He worked as an assistant professor at Faculty of Engineering and Technology, Shiksha Anusandhan in Deemed TB University from March 2017 to June 2018. From July 2018, he is working as an assistant professor in the Department of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, Birla Institute of Technology and Science, BITS, Pilani, Hyderabad campus. His research interests are machine learning, deep learning, biomedical signal processing, sensor data processing, medical image processing, and Internet of Things (IoT) for healthcare. He has published more than 75 research papers in reputed international journals and conferences. He has served as a reviewer for more than 15 scientific journals and served as a technical program committee (TPC) member in various national and international conferences. He is an associate editor for the IET Electronics Letters and academic editor for Biomed Research International Journal Hindawi. He is also working as the guest editor for Frontiers in Physiology Journal. So, and today he will present on multi-scale domain machine learning and deep learning approaches for the analysis and classification of biomedical signals. So, with this, I welcome Rajesh Tripathi to take over from here. Yes, Dr. Rajesh Kumar Tripathi. Yeah, over to you.
Yes. So thank you, Dr. Padi, for the introduction. So good morning to all of you. So let us start the today's talk. So the topic I will discuss mainly based on the multi-scale domain machine learning and deep learning, which is very emerging topic now. So for the biomedical signal processing. So the theme of my talk is like, so I'll discuss two of our recent publications. So first one, multi-scale deep neural network for the detection of shockable ventricular arrhythmia using electrocardiogram signals. Then second part is multi-scale domain machine learning approach for the classification of sleep stages using electroencephalogram signal. So first one is associated with cardiovascular signal processing. So that means machine learning applications for cardiovascular signal processing. The second one, so multi-scale domain machine learning application for the neural information processing. So let us start the first one. So that is the detection of shockable ventricular arrhythmia using multi-scale deep neural network. Now, shockable ventricular arrhythmia is the life-threatening cardiac arrhythmia. So that means which require immediate defibrillation therapy. So the types of shockable ventricular arrhythmia is like rapid ventricular tachycardia and ventricular fibrillation. So in rapid ventricular tachycardia, we have the abnormal electrical activity. So that can be revealed through the electroencephalogram signal. So as we can see in the plot at the right side, so the figure C is nothing but a normal ECG signal. So in normal ECG signal, we can observe the P wave, QRS complex, and T wave. So that means the clinical features have already been predefined. So like your RR interval, then P wave amplitude, QRS duration, then T wave amplitude, T wave duration. All these features are already defined. So cardiologists use this information, prior information, for the diagnosis of cardiac ailment. So any deviation from these clinical features, so that is the sign of the cardiac arrhythmia, or you can say cardiac disease. So this rapid ventricular tachycardia, in this case, no longer the ECG signal is like a normal sinus rhythm. So, but here we have some abnormal ECG episodes with a very high ventricular rate. So that means obviously the heart rate will be very high as compared to your normal sinus rhythm. Now, so ventricular fibrillation is a very progressive step of ventricular tachycardia. So if the sudden defibrillation therapy will not be given, then obviously so there will be the heart attack and blood clots and other related symptoms will come. So the patients will no longer to stay. So that means, so the main thing is in automated external defibrillator therapy and implantable cardioverter defibrillator therapy. So first thing is, let us detect these two episodes. So that means both rapid ventricular tachycardia and ventricular fibrillation. So these two episodes can be detected through various signal processing techniques. So that means we have two stages. First one is detection of these two episodes. If successfully detected, then the shock therapy will be initiated. So accordingly, so here, so in ventricular fibrillation, so here heart fails to pump the blood to other parts of the body, so which lead to the sudden cardiac arrest. So to detect these two episodes, various methods has been published so till now. So all these methods are based on extraction of features from the ECG signal itself, and by the help of various classifiers like your support vector machine, K nearest neighbor, even multi-layer perceptron and other machine learning approaches has been used to classify whether the rhythm is normal sinus rhythm or it's ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation. Now, so the problem in those methods, like so selection of features. So which features we need to consider? So that means which feature is highly correlated with ECG signal such that it will give better performance by the help of classifier. So this prior information is to select these features is a very challenging task in machine learning. So now, so in deep learning, what is the advantage? Now, deep learning doesn't require any feature extraction. So that means both feature extraction and classification done in one phase. So that means, so we can extract various learnable features in the convolution pooling. So example is convolutional neural network. So you can see in convolutional neural network we have some learnable kernels. So from these learnable kernels, we can extract feature maps. So once we have these feature maps, so we can append various fully connected layers, or you can say MLP layers. So fully connected layers are like feature vector layers. So once we append all those things, we can create one more robust network. So that can be helpful for the detection of shockable ventricular arrhythmia. Now, so one more challenging thing in deep neural network is because the ECG is a multi-component signal. Now, ECG multi-component signal means it has various frequency components. So normally in shockable ventricular arrhythmia, so that means ventricular tachycardia and ventricular fibrillation. So Professor Clifford from MIT has already verified that low frequency information is very significant during these two pathologies. So if we can emphasize low frequency information in our deep neural network, then we can able to detect these two pathologies in an efficient way. Now, so that is the motivation behind to develop this multi-scale deep convolutional neuron. So what is multi-scale deep convolutional neuron? Now, first step is, first we need to perform the multi-scale analysis using our signal processing technique. So once we have this multi-scale domain signal of ECG, so that means ECG is decomposed into various subband signals. So that means, so here you can see this is the spectrum of ECG signal. So maximum clinical information associated between 0.5 hertz to 45 hertz. So here as the sampling frequency is 250 hertz. So maximum information you can see up to 35 to 40 hertz in the ECG signal. But normally we consider 0.5 to 45 hertz as the frequency range for the ECG signal analysis. Now, so during shockable ventricular arrhythmia, so 0 to 25 hertz frequency is highly affected. So that means if we can emphasize this frequency range, then if we design the deep neural network by considering the subband signals which fall in this frequency range, that will be helpful for the diagnosis of shockable ventricular arrhythmia. Now, so what we consider now, we develop the fixed boundary range empirical wavelet transform. So empirical wavelet transform is already there. So what is the theory behind empirical wavelet transform? Now, empirical wavelet transform, the first step is detect the peaks in the Fourier spectrum. Now, once we detect the peaks in the Fourier spectrum, so between two adjacent peaks, so we can take the average to calculate one boundary point. So that means suppose we have one composite sinusoid with frequency like 4 hertz, 8 hertz, then 13 hertz. Now, so first we detect the peaks. Now 4 hertz one peak, then second peak at 8 hertz. Now if you take the average, so 4 plus 8 divided by 2, so that means at 6 hertz we will get one boundary point. Similarly, between second peak and third peak we will get another boundary point. Now once we got these boundary points, if we take 0 and the first boundary point, so that means that boundary point and first 0 to that boundary point we can consider one filter. So that means we have one Littlewood, Paley and Mayer's wavelet. So that first we detect the boundary points. Once we have the boundary points, so between two boundary points we can design one filter. So obviously the first filter 0 to first boundary point, so that will be one low pass filter. So that is your scaling function. So which is very different from your normal DWT, discrete wavelet transform. So in empirical wavelet transform, always the first boundary point, so 0 to first boundary point will be your first low pass filter or approximation subband. Now, so from first boundary point to second boundary point, you need band pass filter, and likewise up to pi. So that means up to fs by 2 fm, so maximum frequency. So you have all these band pass filters. So first filter is low pass, rest all are band pass filter. So that is the motivation of empirical wavelet transform. So now, so in shockable ventricular arrhythmia, so because the ECG signal is highly non-stationary signal, so because in shockable ventricular arrhythmia we don't have like P, QRS, T and all these patterns are repeating. So normally in normal sinus rhythm the ECG is quasi-stationary, but during pathology the ECG is highly non-stationary. Now, so when the signal is non-stationary, you have multiple peaks in the Fourier spectrum. Now, if you detect all peaks by the help of empirical wavelet transform in the first stage of empirical wavelet, so it is a very high computational complexity task. So to overcome that part, so what we did, now we consider these boundary points. So these boundary points are fixed by the help of that means the accuracy of the deep CNN network. So we fixed these boundary points. So based on the maximum accuracy of the deep CNN, so that we have already evaluated in the latter stage. So let us see the first boundary we have considered between 1 to 2 hertz. So you can see here first boundary. So first is 1 to 2 hertz. Now, so before that, what we did, now we filter the ECG signal so into between 1 to 45 hertz. So between 1 to 45 hertz. So first filter range is 1 to 2 hertz. Now the second filter 2 to 4 hertz, then we have 2 to 6 hertz, then 6 to 12, then 12 to 16, then 16 to 20, 20 to 32, then 30 to 40. So we have this much the filters that we have already kept in the Fourier spectrum, so that we can design the empirical wavelet filter. So this is the block diagram. So first is ECG signal. Then we have applied the pre-processing. So pre-processing means, so that is the filtering and segmentation of the ECG signal. Because we have the longer duration ECG signal. So for applying any signal processing algorithm, first we need to segment the ECG. So like 2-second episodes or 4-second episodes, 8-second episodes, 10-second episodes. So that means, so this optimal duration of ECG signal will be selected based on the performance of deep CNN. Now, so after segmentation of ECG signal, so we have ECG episodes, or we can interpret this as ECG frame. So from this ECG frame, what we did, now we applied the fixed boundary based or fixed frequency range based empirical wavelet transform. Now, once we apply the fixed frequency range empirical wavelet transform, we can extract various components or modes, or you can say subband signals. Now, these subband signals will be the input to deep convolutional neural. So here we can see we don't have any feature extraction stage. So directly we have extracted the subband signal. So that is the multi-scale analysis. So once we have this subband signal, we have considered the deep convolutional neural network for the classification of normal and non-shockable ventricular arrhythmia. So shockable versus non-shockable ventricular arrhythmia. Now let us see the filter so that we have considered. So mainly empirical scaling and wavelet function. So empirical scaling function. So because we have the transition from 0 to that boundary point, so that means so it's a low pass filter. So this is the equation. So Littlewood-Paley and Mayer's wavelet. So that means 1. So your cutoff frequency between omega n minus tau n. So tau n is nothing but transition phase width. Now, so this adjustment of transition phase width is very important to design the empirical wavelet filter bank. So as you can see here, so this transition phase width is very important. So once you vary the transition phase width so that you can design the optimal filter in empirical wavelet transform. So the first filter is empirical scaling function. Then we have the band pass filter. So that is why empirical wavelet function. So this is the equation. So that like your normal empirical wavelet. But only thing is, so we have not considered the detection of peaks in the Fourier spectrum by the help of maxima. So many methods are there. Maxima method, minima method using various order static filters. So that is nothing but your enhanced empirical wavelet transform. Now also people have, instead of Fourier transform, people have considered Fourier Bessel series expansion based empirical wavelet transform. So that means in empirical wavelet transform, the first step is application of Fourier transform to get the spectrum of the signal, non-stationary signal. Now detect the peaks. So because the Fourier transform assumes the signals are stationary. So instead of that assumption, if we can develop, like instead of Fourier transform, if we can apply Fourier Bessel series expansion, then we have the double frequency resolution in the signal itself. So then we can detect peaks and design the filter bank in the Fourier Bessel domain. So that is nothing but your Fourier Bessel series expansion based EW. So one can also use other transforms like Fourier Hermite, which is very popular in ECG signal processing. So in Fourier Hermite domain, one can design empirical wavelet filter bank. So once we have all those things, now we can extract the subband signal. So these are the subband signals that we have evaluated. First 5 subband signal for normal case, then for ventricular tachycardia case and ventricular fibrillation case. So first column you can see for the subband signal, first subband signal of ventricular tachycardia ECG signal. Now here second subband signal, third subband signal, fourth subband signal and fifth subband signal for ventricular tachycardia. So the middle column is for the ventricular fibrillation. So as we can see here in the low frequency component, so the characteristics of subband signals are different for ventricular tachycardia, ventricular fibrillation, as well as for the normal sinus rhythm. So in normal sinus rhythm, you can see the T wave episodes are efficiently captured, and the low frequency component of P wave is also captured in the first subband signal. But so in ventricular tachycardia and ventricular fibrillation, so we have the appearance of fibrillatory waves. So ventricular fibrillatory waves. So this information is captured in the low frequency subband signal. Now, if we emphasize the low frequency subband signal in the deep neural networks, so that will be helpful for the detection of shockable ventricular arrhythmia. So QRS complex high frequency information is captured in higher subband signal. So here we have evaluated 7 or 8 subband, but considered only first 5 subband signals. So mainly to emphasize the low frequency subband information. Now, so the next part is we have developed one deep CNN architecture. So that means suppose if we consider 8-second ECG duration. Now, so 8-second ECG duration. So what is the samples? Now 2000, because 250 hertz as the sampling frequency. 250 hertz multiplied by 8 equal to so 2000 samples. Now, so in the fixed boundary empirical wavelet transform stage, we have evaluated 8 subband signal. Now we have selected first 5 subband signals. So what will be the input to deep CNN? So input to deep CNN is 2000 by 5. Now this is one tensor. So tensor means 1 by 2000 by 5. So that means for one instance, so it's like 1 by 2000 by 5. Suppose if you have extracted, suppose 15,000, 20,000 ECG instances or frames. So obviously, so this will be one tensor. So that means so your number of instances, then samples of each subband signal. Now 5 is nothing but your number of subbands. Now, so what we consider here, now for each instance, first we need to do the forward propagation. in your deep convolutional neural network. So the first layer we have considered as the convolution layer. So this is 1D convolution. So because we are applying the convolutional neural network in the multi-scale, so it's like 1D convolution layer. So first convolution layer, so we have considered the kernel size as 7. So that means 20 filters we have considered, 20 kernels, and each kernel size is 7. Now, then here the stride is 1. So that means once we apply this 20 filters, so now we can evaluate 20 feature maps. So here you can see, so each size feature map is like n minus m plus 1. So that means 2000 minus 7 plus 1. So that means it is 1994. So here we got 1994 by 20. So these are the 20 feature maps. Now the next layer is nothing but your pooling layer. So we have considered the max pooling. So because also one can try the average pooling part and to check the performance of the CNN. So mainly this pooling, so various types of pooling operations are there: max pooling, min pooling, then also average pooling. So obviously one can select based on the maximum accuracy value that is obtained in the training phase as well as validation phase of the deep CNN algorithm. Now, so in the max pooling part, so we have considered, so pooling grid as 3. So that means 3 samples we have considered and take the maximum value. Suppose in that grid, suppose the elements are like 0.5, 0.7, 0.9. So what will be the maximum? So 0.9, obviously the 0.9 will be selected. Now stride equal to 3. So we have considered stride equal to 3. So in the convolution layer, so the activation function considered as ReLU activation function. So what is the advantage of ReLU? Because the derivative equal to 1. So that will be very helpful when we do the back propagation algorithm, or we can say BPCNN, application of BPCNN to obfuscate the parameters. So that means the learnable kernels in the convolution as well as in the fully connected layer stages. So pooling layer doesn't have any filters. So that means it is like reshape, or you can say reduction of the dimension of convolution feature map. So here we have applied the max pooling to reduce the size. So here you can see 1994 by 20. Now this has been reduced to 664 by 20 in the pooling layer. Now after that, in the second convolution layer, we have considered 60 filters. Now 60 filters means 60 feature maps. So here you can see, so 60 filters total. So 219 by 60. Now what are the parameters? So you can see here again 1 by 7. So kernel size is 7. Then 60 filters. Now, so in the again second pooling layer, so we have again considered 60 filters. Now the pooling is, so three sample grid we have considered. Now again the ReLU activation function and dropout is 7%. So that means 7.7. So 70% neurons. So we have considered in this layer. So that means 7% we have deactivated. So only 0.3% neurons has been considered. Now, so in the next hidden layer, so convolution layer, 120 filters. So you can see the size of the feature map. So each feature map 213 as the size. So similarly, the next convolution layer, we have 120. So in physiological signal, what we have experimented, if we increase the number of filters, then it will give better performance. But for image processing application, always we need to reduce the number of filters. So that is the main thing that we have observed for this ECG signal analysis. Always, if we increase the number of filters in convolution layer, so that will give better performance as compared to the decreasing order filters. Now, then in the fourth convolution layer feature maps, we have flattened to formulate the first fully connected layers. So number of neurons as 24,840 units. Then we have considered 3 MLP layers. So first MLP to like 1500 neurons as the first, second fully connected layer. Now in the third fully connected layer, 375 neurons. Then we have the fourth fully connected layer, 50 neurons. So at the output, so we have 2 classes. So that is by 1 neuron. So that means whether it is 0 or 1. So that means this is like binary cross entropy function. So that means it's like logistic regression cost function. So that means maximum likelihood function, cost function based output. So once we formulated this network, so then we have tested our algorithm with 2 publicly available ECG database. So first one is Creighton University database, which is available in the PhysioNet. Now, then second part is MIT BIH malignant ventricular arrhythmia dataset, so VFTB. So from these two datasets, so first dataset CUDB contains 35 single channel ECG signals. So that means lead 1 ECG signal is there. Now similarly VFDB contains 2 lead ECG signal, lead 1 and lead 2. So here in this study we have considered lead 1 because that is common to both databases. Now in CUDB database, so we have normal sinus rhythm, ventricular tachycardia, ventricular fibrillation, and also ventricular flutter. So what we consider now for suckable versus non-suckable. So suckable is like ventricular tachycardia, ventricular flutter, and ventricular fibrillation. So that is suckable. Now all other rhythms are fall under non-suckable class. So we have formulated 3 classification things. One is suckable versus non-suckable. Second one is ventricular tachycardia versus ventricular fibrillation. So that means, so when you initiate shock therapy, so ventricular fibrillation obviously required higher shock. So that means so that means we need to detect the onset part of both tachycardia and fibrillation. So that is also a challenging task in biomedical signal processing. So that is why we have also formulated ventricular fibrillation versus ventricular tachycardia classification scheme. Then we have also non-VF versus VF classification scheme. Now, so for each database, so what we consider now, so we have considered 4 types of ECG windows. So first one is 2 seconds, second one is 4 seconds, 5 seconds, then 8 seconds. So we have evaluated, we have segmented the ECG signal and evaluated the 2 second frames from various classes like ventricular tachycardia, fibrillation, flutter, then also the normal sinus rhythm. So here you can see there is a class imbalance problem which may impact the performance of deep CNN. So what we consider now, so we had applied the random oversampling for the minority class in the training stage only. So that means that is the method to overcome the class imbalance problem. Or recently many people are using generalized adversarial network to overcome because they are generating the ECG signal. Now once they generate the ECG signal, so we can overcome the class imbalance problem also. So the simple method is random oversampling. So here so 3 classification tasks, as you can see. So ventricular tachycardia versus fibrillation, fibrillation versus non-fibrillation, suckable versus non-suckable. So all this multi-scale deep CNN architecture has been developed in the Python framework with Google Colab and TensorFlow and Keras with TensorFlow at the backend. So that means you can see we have considered the parameters like learning rate, 8 into 10 to the power minus 4. So VF versus non-VF, 1 into 10 to the power minus 3 as the learning rate. So suckable versus non-suckable, 3 into 10 to the power minus 4. So that means we need to obviate this weight. So that is why we need to consider the learning rate. So optimizer as Adam optimizer. So that means then the total number of epochs. So VT versus VF, 70 as the total epochs. So VF versus non-VF, 100 as the epochs. So similarly batch size 100 here. Now VT versus VF, batch size as 18, suckable versus non-suckable, batch size as 88. Now, so random sampling, oversampling for the minority class is used to overcome the class imbalance problem. Now, so we considered 3 types of validation here to evaluate the performance of deep CNN. So first one is holdout cross validation. So that means 80% as training, 10% as validation, and so 10% as testing. So this is for the holdout cross validation. Now, so second one is 10-fold cross validation we have considered. Now for each fold, 90% instances as training, 10% as testing. Now the third part also we have considered as leave one out cross validation. So that means the episodes, or you can say frames for one subject is used for the testing, and remaining all other subject used for the training. So this will be repeated for all subject case. So that means that is your leave one out cross validation. So we have applied these 3 cross validation methods to evaluate the performance of a multi-scale deep CNN classifier. Now, so in 10-fold cross validation also we have the class imbalance problem. So what we consider, Now, so we consider the random oversampling during training only in the hold tenfold and hold out cross validation to overcome this class imbalance problem. Now you can see this is the performance of the classifier that we have obtained when we consider the hold out cross validation. Now for the classification scheme as suckable versus non-suckable. So with frame length, ECG frame length as 2 second, 4 second, 5 second and 8 seconds. So we obtain the accuracy as 97.856%. So mean and standard deviation. So for hold out cross validation normally, so we run the program 5 times and then take the average as well as the standard deviation. So that is why we have evaluated for 2 second frames. So the accuracy is 97.856%. So similar variation you can see in sensitivity, specificity, and F-score values. Now, so again we have the 4 second episode. So from here, from suckable versus non-suckable ventricular arrhythmia. So at 5 second episode we got the maximum accuracy. So that means 98.871%. So that means by considering first 5 modes of ECG signal from the fixed boundary based EWT stage, so we obtain this much as the accuracy for suckable versus non-suckable arrhythmia classification with hold out cross validation. Now the second part, VF versus non-VF. So ventricular fibrillation versus non-VF. So here at 2 second you can see 96.641. So with standard deviation as 0.426. Now so here we obtain the maximum accuracy as 97.872 at 8 second ECG duration, because the ventricular fibrillation and we have the non-ventricular. So ventricular fibrillation and ventricular tachycardia episodes are already there. Fibrillation flutter is also there. So they are highly correlated. So if we consider the longer duration of ECG signal, then only we can capture the change. So that is why here you can see at 8 seconds, so we are getting the maximum accuracy. Now, so here ventricular tachycardia and ventricular fibrillation classification. Now these two are highly correlated. So that is why definitely we will get the less performance as compared to suckable versus non-suckable and ventricular. Because in non-suckable we have normal sinus rhythm, we have atrial fibrillation, we have premature ventricular complexes and other types of rhythms. So easily we can say these two are highly discriminative. So that is why deep neural network performs better. But in ventricular fibrillation versus ventricular tachycardia, so obviously the accuracy you can see the maximum accuracy is obtained for the 4 second ECG episodes and the value is 81.743%. So you can see also the F-score value 82.293%. So because these two things are, because the progressive stage of ventricular tachycardia and flutter is nothing but your ventricular fibrillation. Now, so also we have evaluated the classification performance using tenfold cross validation. Now in tenfold cross validation for 8 second ECG episode, suckable versus non-suckable, so we got the maximum performance as 99.036%. Now similarly VF versus non-VF, so similarly in also 8 second duration, so 99.80%. So we can conclude that 8 second efficiently capture this information, so like pathological changes. So that is why for tenfold, because tenfold cross validation is a robust way of evaluating the performance of any machine learning and deep learning algorithm. So that is why, so here 8 second is the optimal duration best selection of ECG segment for the detection of suckable ventricular arrhythmia. So again for the VT versus VF, so here we obtain at 5 seconds. So the maximum accuracy is 83.212%. Now, so the third part is leave one out cross validation. So leave one out cross validation. So for each subject we have evaluated and taken the average. So that means, so for first, so that means 2 second ECG segment, the accuracy we obtained as 94.26%. Similarly, sensitivity 99.11 and specificity 83.83%. Now, so also for the 8 second ECG episode, so we obtain the maximum accuracy, so 97.592. So that means, so this is like one is intra-patient, then another one is inter-patient. So tenfold cross validation and hold out cross validation select the episodes from the same subject because this is based on the instance specific cross validation. But here it is like subject specific cross validation or leave one out cross validation. So technically we can call this as subject specific cross validation. So one subject, so we evaluate, suppose one subject all instances are correctly classified, then it is 100%. Now for other subject, suppose 95% instances are correctly classified, so obviously the accuracy is 95%. So if we take the average of all subject classification results, then only we will get the overall performance due to leave one out subject specific cross validation. So for 8 seconds, so the accuracy is 97.592%. Now, so we have compared with existing methods. So recently, one 11-layer CNN has been published for the detection of shockable versus non-shockable ventricular arrhythmia. So 11 layers in 11-layer CNN. So the authors directly taken the ECG signal and applied the convolutional neural network for the detection of shockable ventricular arrhythmia. Now, using directly the ECG signal, because ECG signal is contaminated with various types of artifacts. Now, so if we will not select the frequency component of ECG signal, so that will degrade the performance of CNN. So that is why they have obtained 93.18% using 10-fold cross validation for the same database, so like CUDB, VFDB, and also they have considered more signals like from MIT DB database to overcome the class imbalance problem. Now, so here, so what is the advantage in our work? Now, so we have considered the frequency components like frequency range of the ECG signal and evaluated the subband signal. Now we are capturing the local information of the ECG signal, but directly if we fed the ECG signal to CNN, so that will not give. So that means the filters used in the convolutional neural network may not be sufficient to capture the information of the ECG signal for the detection of shockable ventricular arrhythmia. So that is why our method has the advantage that so we are working on multi-scale. So in the multi-scale domain, so these learnable filters of the convolution, various convolution stages in the non-learnable filters can efficiently capture the local frequency component, and which will be effective for the detection of shockable ventricular arrhythmia and also classification of ventricular fibrillation and ventricular tachycardia. Now, so the application is, so this multi-scale deep CNN can also be applied to other signals like PPG signal. So recently the PPG signal based hypertension detection is very important in the clinical standard. So that can be applied to other signals like PPG and also EEG signal. Then also various imaging parts, suppose like detection of like COVID-19 using X-ray image, CT scan image. So we can use this fixed boundary based EWT to decompose the modes or sub images. Then we can develop the deep CNN over these sub images. And also the advantage is we can evaluate the classification performance of deep CNN by considering the individual frequency component, like individual frequency range subband signal. So first subband signal using deep CNN, what is the classification performance? So that means we can easily interpret that which frequency component is highly effective during shockable ventricular arrhythmia, and that can be applied to also various other applications, other biomedical applications and speech applications also. So this is the first part of the presentation. Now the second part is multi-scale domain machine learning approach for the classification of sleep stages using EEG signal. Now, so EEG reveals the electrical activity of brain. So that means so sleep is a very important phase for every human being, and it plays an important role in maintaining mental and physical. So lack of sleep obviously causes various sleep related pathologies like insomnia, paroxysm, sleep disorder like sleep apnea, then also neurological disease. So sleep apnea is not a sleep related respiratory type of disease, but progressive sleep apnea may cause other type of sleep disorder. So like cardiac disease, then also hypertension. So many other things can be so that means can be the cause of in lack of sleep. Now, so how to detect this sleep related pathology? So to detect sleep related pathologies, first we need to classify the sleep stages. So we have various type of sleep stages like your wake, then we have S1 sleep, like your light sleep, then deep sleep, then your REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. Now, so when, like, suppose if anyone has sleep related disorder, like suppose if anyone has sleep apnea, so how the doctors will diagnose? So doctors normally prescribe the polysomnography test, so which is an overnight test. So that means, so many sensors are there, so to record the various signals like EEG, electrocardiogram, respiratory signal, electromyogram, oxygen saturation. So many sensors need to put in the body, then have to record the various signals. So from that, so that means the apnea hypoapnea index will be calculated. So based on this apnea hypoapnea index, so then the therapy will be initiated, like CPAP, continuous positive air pressure therapy will be given. So that means, so recently various without considering this sensor, can we wirelessly detect the sleep apnea? So that means people are developing the bioradars. So by the help of bioradars, so people are detecting various sleep related pathology, because if we put these sensors to the body, obviously this will be very discomfort to the patient. Now, so by the help of wireless body area network and also the radar, bioradars, we can detect the sleep apnea. So that is a very emerging topic now. So for the detection of sleep related pathology. So then, so discrimination of sleep stages from also in polysomnography test. So we need to check how many wake episodes are there, then how many S1 light sleep episode, deep sleep episode, and REM sleep episode. So if someone has the deep sleep episode, that means it is very good for his health. So deep sleep episodes are very nice. So similarly, someone is devoting 4 to 5 hours as wake stays during the sleep. So that means he or she has some problem. So like your either maybe sleep apnea or maybe bruxism or insomnia. So all those things. So sleep stays classification plays one very important role, which is a very primary thing in clinical standard. So what we consider now, so we develop one approach, multi-scale domain machine learning approach to classify the sleep stages. So using only one ECG, so that means one sensor data only. So that means only the EEG signal, so multi-channel EEG signal. So we have considered 4-channel EEG signal. So first one is F4C4 frontal electrode. So frontal, central, so C4 P4 central parietal 4, then P4 occipital, P4O2, then C4 A1. Now, so once we have selected these 4 channels, now so first we have segmented the multi-channel ECG recording into 30-second frames. So 30-second frames means, so because we have 512 samples, so if we take 30 seconds frames, so obviously we have 15360 samples. So this will be one matrix. So one instance of multi-channel EEG is like 4 by 15360 matrix. Now, so because this is a multi-channel signal, so obviously we need to develop the multivariate signal processing approach to segregate each channel into modes, because our objective is to apply the machine learning or deep learning in the multi-scale. So because we have already seen that multi-scale approach has the advantage that it can capture the local information. Now, so what we consider now, we develop the multivariate projection-based fixed boundary empirical wavelet transform. So one can definitely extend this concept multivariate projection to develop the adaptive wavelet filter bank. Now, so as we have 4 channels, so we have considered this multivariate projection-based fixed boundary empirical wavelet transform. So let us see the theory of how we do the projection. So that means we have 4-channel data. So to project this 4-channel data to unit sphere and consider the projected signal. So the objective is like we have 4-channel data. Now develop the projected signal from this 4-channel data. Now detect the peaks in the Fourier spectrum of projected signal. Now once we have the peaks, we can create the filter bank. Now, so once we obtain the filter bank, now let us do the Fourier transform of individual channel and take IFFT inverse Fourier transform to evaluate the subband signals of each channel. Now, so once we have the subband signal, so we have extracted various nonlinear features. So 2 nonlinear features we have considered. So first one is dispersion entropy, then bubble entropy. So that is to measure the complexity, or you can say non-linearness in the subband signal. So that because EG is non-stationary and non-linear signal. So obviously the entropy measures like state space entropy measures will be highly effective for the classification of sleep stages. So now once we have this 40-dimensional feature vector, so we have developed one hybrid learning based network for the classification of sleep stages. Now, so next part is the theory of fixed boundary, that means the multivariate projection based fixed boundary empirical wavelet filter bank. Now, so we have 4 channels: channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4. Now, so let us consider one unit sphere. Now in unit sphere, so we can evaluate the projected signal, so by considering the direction cosine. Now, so direction cosine can be like, suppose if you consider 4 channel signal, so direction cosine coordinates can be 1 by square root of 4, 1 by square root of 4, 1 by square root of 4, 1 by square root of 4. So one can also use 1 by square root of 4 minus 1 by square root, because because in ECG signal, so if you consider the lead 1 to lead 2, lead V6, so that means the there is lead V1 and the lead V2 as the negative amplitude R wave. So that means small R wave, then QRS, so highly negative part. So that means the characteristics is different. So there also you can try the projection as square root of minus 1 by square root of 12. So here in EEG signal, so we don't have that type of characteristics. So that is why, so we have considered the projection coefficient or the direction cosine as 1 by square root of 4, again 1 by square root of 4, 1 by square root of 4, and 1 by square. So one can also develop the adaptive projection coefficients. Like let us calculate the energy for first signal, calculate the energy for second channel, third, fourth. Now once you got the energy, now you normalize the energy such that it will be the direction cosines. So once you have the direction cosines, so these are the weights, so to obtain the projected signal. Now you can see the projected signal. So channel 1 multiplied by the direction cosine of channel 1. So here channel 2, direction cosine of channel 2. So that means that is your projected signal. So once we have this projected signal, so the objective of multivariate projection based empirical wavelet transform is to detect the peaks in the Fourier spectrum of projected signal. Now once we have the peaks, so here, so because the EEG signal is non-stationary, we have multiple peaks in the Fourier spectrum. So to detect each peak, then develop the filter bank is a very highly computational complexity task. So what we consider, now we design the rhythm specific filter bank. So like we have in EEG signal delta rhythm, theta rhythm, alpha rhythm, beta rhythm, and gamma rhythm. Now the delta rhythm 0 to 4 Hz. Now we have theta rhythm 4 to 8 Hz, alpha rhythm 8 to 13 Hz, then 13 to 30, then 30 to 75 Hz. Now, so we keep this boundary points 1 in 4 Hz, then 8 Hz, then 13 Hz, then 30 Hz, like that. Now evaluated the filter. Now this filter is nothing but your filter bank is nothing but your multivariate projection based filter bank. So once we obtain this filter bank, now for individual channel, take the FFT of channel 1, multiply with this filter bank. Now convert this to, again apply IFFT to evaluate the subband signal. So in a similar way, we can evaluate the subband signals of all channels. Now, so how to fix the boundary point? Now you have already given the prior information as the frequency point 4, 8, 13, 30, 75. Now empirical wavelet transform requires the boundary point. So how to compute the boundary point? Now 2 pi multiplied by the frequency point divided by the sampling frequency. So that means that is the normalized boundary point is like a normalized frequency. So you can see here the subband signals. So for wake class, here this is for light sleep class, then that is for S1 class, then we have S2 class. So we have extracted the subband signals like delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. So B, C, D, E, F. So A is nothing but wake class, EEG rhythm. So then we have the delta rhythm for wake class, B, figure B. So figure C, theta rhythm for wake class, then alpha rhythm for wake class, beta rhythm for wake class, then gamma rhythm for wake class. So in a similar way, we can also show for the S1 sleep class and S2 sleep class. So clearly we can say this is the difference in the characteristics of each signal. So locally we can capture those differences. So why don't we apply simple Butterworth filter to evaluate the delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma? Now, so here you can see if we directly apply, so we apply the Butterworth filter. So obviously, so definitely you can apply. So you can test, evaluate the accuracy, all those things. Because one problem is the ringing effect. Now, so in empirical wavelet transform, so you don't because this Littlewood, Pale, and Mayer's wavelet is highly optimal. So you can also adjust the transition phase width to develop the optimal filter bank. Now, so once you obtain all those things, all the modes, so then we have evaluated the features like dispersion entropy and bubble entropy from each rhythm of each channel EG. So we have formulated one 40-dimensional feature vector. So to evaluate the performance, so EG signals from cyclic alternation pattern sleep database, which is already available in PhysioNet. So we have considered 20 multi-channel EG recording. Each sampling frequency is 512 Hertz. So out of this 25, so we have 6 recordings from normal class, 7 from insomnia class, 1 each from sleep bruxism and sleep disorder breathing class, like sleep apnea class. Now, so once we have all those things, so what we consider the 4 channels we have, so many channels are there because few recordings have 8 channels, few recordings have 16 channels. So we consider the 4 common channels, P4O2, C4A1, F4C4, and C4P4. So for all 25 recordings. Now, so we have divided into frames of each 30-second duration. Now, these are the number of frames that we have evaluated. So for wake class 2613, S1 sleep 1537, S2 sleep 4955, S3 sleep 2707, S4 sleep 2604. So S1, S2 is called as light sleep, S3, S4 deep sleep, then REM rapid eye movement sleep 2947. So total 17360 ECG episodes we have evaluated. Now for each episode, so that means first 4 channels. Now each channel is decomposed into 5 modes or 5 rhythms. Now so that means so 17,360 by by 5. So that means 5 rhythms. Now each rhythm has sample like 15,360. So that is the tensor that we have obtained. Now so for each instance, so dispersion entropy and bubble entropy features are evaluated. So feature vector size is 40. So once we have this 40-dimensional feature vector, so what we consider now, we develop this hybrid classification model. So the motivation of this hybrid classification model is used the concept of sparse representation as well as the nearest neighbor. So we develop one hybrid classifier by combining sparse representation residual, which is a distance. So that means in sparse residual, so first we consider the training matrix for each class as a dictionary. So this training matrix for each class as dictionary to represent the test instance in a sparse vector. Now once we have the sparse vector, we can obtain the residual. So residual for each class. So that means suppose if you consider wake versus light sleep versus deep sleep versus REM sleep. So 4 class classification problem. Now in the training matrix, 4 dictionaries. So now you have the test instance, evaluate 4 residual values. So once we obtain the residual, so that is also a distance measure. So let us evaluate the norm of residual. So one distance you will calculate. Now, so that is sparse residual part. Now another one is nearest neighbor. So we can compute the nearest neighbor of the instance. So from test instance, we have nearest neighbor training instances. Now we can also evaluate one distance. Now you combine both distances, sparse residual distance and your nearest neighbor distance. So that is the composite distance. Now, so if we take the minimum of argmin, that composite distance, you can pick the class level. Clear? You can pick the class level. So the motivation for development of this hybrid classification is like use the concept of sparse residual, then use the concept of nearest neighbor to develop one robust classification model. So here we consider so different metrics like median metric to select the nearest neighbor instances. So like suppose we have selected 5 nearest neighbor. Now so for each nearest neighbor, so like we obtain the distance for each class. So then we have added with sparse residual. This is the total distance. Then take the arg mean to compute the final class level. So these are the classification results. So first one, wake versus sleep. It's a binary class classification. So using 10-fold cross validation, we obtain the classification accuracy as 91.77%. So using hold out cross validation, 88.58%. So similar variation you can see kappa score, which is also another measure to evaluate the classification performance. So 0.77 for hold out cross validation and 0.83 for 10-fold cross validation. So similarly, we have also considered wake versus non-rapid eye movement versus rapid eye movement. So 3-class classification problem. So under NREM class, so non-rapid eye movement, we have light sleep as well as deep sleep. So that means S1, S2, then S2, then S3, S4. So your classification accuracy using hold out cross validation, 84.43%. Now, so then using 10-fold cross validation, we have 88.14%. So you can see here, so if we consider the multiple class, so obviously the accuracy will reduce, but because in sleep, so all these episodes are highly correlated. So you can see wake and REM, rapid eye movement and wake class. So these two are correlated. So that is why there is a reduction in the accuracy value. Now, the third part is wake versus light sleep versus deep sleep versus REM sleep. So under light sleep class, we have S1 and S2, then deep sleep class, S2 and S3 and S4. So we consider both hold out and 10-fold cross validation. So for hold out cross validation, the accuracy is 76.01%, and for 10-fold cross validation, it is 80.13%. So observation like, so individual class accuracy also we have evaluated. So you can see here for wake class 84.37, light sleep 72.87, deep sleep 80.90%, but REM sleep, so you can see 55.58, because REM and wake, you can see wake class is very high accuracy, but REM 55.58. Similarly, kappa score 0.66 using hold out cross validation, and for 10-fold cross validation we have 0.72. Now for the 5-class classification problem, because wake versus S1 sleep versus S2 sleep versus S3 sleep versus REM sleep. So for 5-class classification problem, so you can see the accuracy value. So accuracy as 73.59%, overall accuracy for hold out cross validation. Now 10-fold cross validation 73.88%. So individual accuracy, so you can see here S1 sleep. So S1 sleep is the first phase of the light sleep. So 42.99% as accuracy. Similarly for 10-fold cross validation 48.86%. Now the last one is wake versus S1 versus S2 versus S3 versus S4 versus REM sleep, all 6 classes. So for this 6 classes, we have obtained the accuracy as 71.08% using 10-fold cross using hold out cross validation. Now hold out 10-fold cross validation 71.68%. So you can see the individual accuracy values. So for wake class, we obtained accuracy as 86.64%. Now, so also for the S4 sleep 82.42% and REM sleep as 72.88%. So now, so here you can see there is a reduction in the S1 sleep, because S1 sleep and wake, these two stages are interlinked. So that is why we got the very less performance here. But for other class like S3 sleep and S4 sleep under deep sleep category, so that is why there is a reduction in performance of S3 sleep. So we have in hybrid classifier we have the parameters like the sparsity level for the test data. So in OMP algorithm we need the sparsity level. So we have the training matrix as dictionary. So test data we need to evaluate the sparse representation. Then only we can calculate the residual. So sparsity level as one parameter, then number of nearest neighbor. So these two are the parameters for the composite classifier, or you can say hybrid classifier. So how to select these two parameters? So we have training set, validation set, and test set. So So we have evaluated the validation set performance. You can see 2, 1, rho equal to sparsity equal to 2, rho equal to 1. So we have 37.96% as the accuracy. Test set accuracy is 39.78%. Similarly, if we increase the sparsity level, so at 20 and 10, nearest neighbor equal to 10 and 20 as the sparsity level, so we got the maximum validation set accuracy 72.18 and 72.72. So this is for the 5 class, so that means 6 class classification problem. So when we increase the sparsity level, so then and also the nearest neighbor, so accuracy start degrading. So then we have compared with existing methods. So as you can see, so our method is better than various existing methods. But here in third method, time domain and spectral features calculated from multi-channel EEG, and they have considered dendrogram based SDM. So dendrogram based SDM means it's like multiple SDM binary classifiers they have considered and taken the so that means composite decision they have considered to evaluate the final class law, which is a very computational complexity task. Now here in our approach, so the approach is mainly based on the distance measures. So that is why our approach is very less computational complexity as compared to dendrogram based support vector machine. And support vector machine requires obviously the training kernel function and other things, other parameter adjustment of kernel bandwidth, and also selection of polynomial, how many polynomials you need to consider, polynomial orders, all those things. So our approach is mainly based on the development of multivariate projection filter bank with this hybrid learning framework and obtain the accuracy as 73.88%. Now, so in these two works, so we mainly concentrate about the multi-scale domain machine learning and deep learning approaches. Now, this multivariate projection-based fixed boundary EWT filter can be extended for other multi-channel signals or multi-channel sensor data. So, like you suppose behavior prediction, or you can say human activity detection, all those things by the help of multi-channel sensor data. So you have multiple sensors, so that you have already connected. Now you have recorded various signal. Now you want to decompose the multi-sensor data. So you can definitely use this multivariate projection and evaluate the projection coefficient to obtain the final subband signals. So any questions? So these are the references. So if you have any questions, you can ask now.
Good morning, sir.
Yes.
Sir, in a conventional wavelet transform, we are decomposing the signal into approximation and detail, sir,
Exactly.
by using different wavelet filters like HAR, Dabachis, like that. So
Yes.
how that empirical wavelet transform is different from this conventional transform? As you have mentioned, we have to find the boundary points. This is the critical thing you have mentioned in your lecture.
Yes.
Here also we are performing decomposition. Am I right, sir?
Exactly.
Here the decomposition, there it is fixed. The frequency range is almost fixed in the case of conventional wavelet transform. But here we have the option to choose the cutoff frequency of that filter. Am I right, sir?
Exactly.
Other than, yes, sir. Can
So discrete wavelet transform is like dyadic wavelet transform. So the grid is dyadic. So like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. Now suppose you have one peak at 65 hertz. Now again another peak in Fourier transform you have another peak at 35 hertz. Now suppose if you consider this dyadic wavelet transform, if there is a peak at the boundary point, so like 16, then like 8 to 16, then 16 to 32. Now suppose you have 16.1 or 16.2 at the frequency. So that information you cannot capture using dyadic wavelet transform. And also the disadvantage, like how to select the number of decomposition level in DWT. So which is a very important thing. DWT selection of decomposition level, and also the mother wavelet, which should be highly correlated with the signal. Like ECG signal, normally we consider the bi-orthogonal wavelet. Now EEG DB4 mother wavelet. Now here you don't have anything like decomposition level. So based on this Fourier transform peaks, so automatically the decomposition level will be selected. So suppose you have 10 peaks, so obviously you have 10 decomposition levels. So like that, and also Littlewood, Paley, Mayer wavelet you can replace using various other techniques like O-Spiline, which is very interesting now to develop that means zero transition phase width based filters. So that filters are highly optimal. O-Spilines, which is recently developed. Now you can replace the Littlewood, Paley wavelet wavelet basis function, that cosine sine that I had already shown the formula approach, like a scaling function and wavelet function. Instead of those two, you can replace the O-Spiline. So it will be like adaptive O-Spilines based filter bank. So if one can do that, so obviously the transition phase width thing will be added. And one more thing in DWT, the problem is, so if you plot the filter frequency response in DWT, so the transition phase width is very high. So there is a spectral leakage and other things. The subband signal, if you reconstruct the subband signal, that means if you reconstruct the signal from the subband signal and you evaluate the error between the original signal and subband signal, so error will be very high. So obviously the error can be minimized by the help of dual tree complex wavelet transform, and also DWT is not scale invariant. So that is one more problem in DWT. So many advantages are there in EWT. So you can automatically detect the boundary points, or you have the flexibility that you can also use Fourier Bessel series expansion, Fourier Hermite, but that is not possible in discrete wavelet transform, because that is based on the downsampling operation. Again, filter GH, low pass filter, high pass filter, then again downsampling, other things. So many processing things are going on in DWT.
Sir, I have one fundamental query, sir.
Yes.
If we take DWT,
yes,
and then without doing any operation, if we try to reconstruct the signal,
yes,
perfectly we should be able to reconstruct it, because it is a linear transform. In that
yes,
case, without any loss of information, we should be able to reconstruct the signal. Am I right, sir?
If we have the non-stationary signal, let us consider one ECG signal. So ECG signal, if we consider the ECG signal now for shockable ventricular arrhythmia case, and also we have compared with wavelet transform, also discrete wavelet transform based features we have also we have compared. Now, so in ECG signal during shockable ventricular arrhythmia, now the components that we obtain from the ECG signal, that means the DWT, so those components we have already incorporated in CNN. So the performance is like 96% for the shockable versus non-shockable ventricular arrhythmia. So because this is dyadic, so if you consider the first five subband signal like 0 to 2, then 2 to 4, then 4 to 8, 8 to 16, then 16 to suppose 32. So you can see the frequency range, the dyadic wavelet transform that selects. Now, if you consider the fixed boundary range, so up to 20 Hertz, the first 5 subband signal. So in the ECG context, that has the advantage. The DWT select more subband. That means the frequency that are not useful for the detection of shockable ventricular arrhythmia. So DWT select that part. So that is why it is giving less performance, 96%. Now, if you see in EWT, fixed boundary based EWT, so it select only the frequency component. So up to 20 Hertz, because that has already been verified that up to 20 Hertz, 0.5 to 20 Hertz is highly effective for the detection of shockable ventricular arrhythmia. But if you reconstruct one signal from the subband signals, obviously your DWT, suppose it has error like 0.015, then dual tree complex wavelet transform has error 0.012. So obviously the dual tree complex wavelet transform has less error as compared to DWT. And also in EWT, so you have the complex thing, the subband signals are complex. So because you are evaluating FFT, then IFFT, but in DWT, so it's like downsampling, then again multiscale decomposition. So definitely you will get the real valued signal. So one property is like time invariant and other things that will not satisfy. So you can take one impulse function and decompose the signal and reconstruct the signal. So then you evaluate the error. Obviously you will get less error in a dual tree complex wavelet transform as well as empirical wavelet transform.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sir, one query, sir.
Yes.
Sir, can you brief the steps involved in empirical wavelet transform? What I can understand from your lecture is we have the signal, for example, x of t. We are
Yes.
taking the Fourier transform of the signal that we will be able to get x of omega.
Yes.
From the Fourier transform, we will be able to get the peaks.
Yes.
From the peaks, we are supposed to compute the boundary
Yes.
points. That boundary points will be used as a hint to design the filters in the empirical wavelet.
Yes.
Is it true? What
Yes,
are
yes.
the sequence
Yes.
of steps, sir?
So many methods are used to detect the boundary points. One is maxima method. So like scale space is there, then like adaptive way one can use the minima, local minima method is also there. Many methods are there. Recently what researchers are doing, they first smooth the Fourier spectrum, or they have used various power spectral estimation like Wells method they have considered, or that Blackman-Turkey method they have considered to evaluate the power spectral density, which is a very smooth power spectral density. Once they obtain the smooth power spectrum, obviously the number of peaks will be reduced if you consider the smooth power, because unwanted peaks will be removed. Now, so then they have applied local maxima. So many methods are there. It's an ongoing research to develop the empirical wavelet filter bank. But for simplicity, obviously one can apply. So that means the simple, that algorithm that already published in 2014, empirical wavelet transform. The simple method is evaluate the Fourier spectrum, detect the peaks using local maxima method. Now evaluate the boundary. Once we obtain the boundary, now evaluate the filter bank. So once we obtain the filter bank, now do the FFT, then multiply the filter bank, then IFFT to get the modes or components.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
And also the enhanced empirical wavelet transform, which is very robust as compared to empirical wavelet transform. Enhanced EW. So there you have the flexibility, like you can use order static filters. So order static filters like median, so other order static filters can evaluate the boundary points.
Yes, sir, because they are also effective in minimizing the impact of noise. For example, if we have impulse noise or something like that, then
so
recently
we have also adjusted this transition phase width. We have developed one method to adjust the transition. It's highly optimal. So we have submitted in IEEE transactions and instrumentation measurement. Very soon it will come. So definitely you can see that paper also. That is optimal EWT filter bank. So it's very highly effective as compared to discrete wavelet transform based filter bank. So that means the transition phase width is almost zero between two filters. The transition phase width is almost zero. So definitely you can see that paper. I will share in the research kit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, participants, do you have other questions? Okay, yeah, there is another question in the chat box.
Yes.
For processing now.
Yeah. So in deep learning, so normally we consider the learnable features. So learnable features means, so we first initialize the kernels or the weight in the convolution layer. Now also in the fully connected. Now during the back propagation stage, so we update these kernels to obtain the feature maps. Now for image processing, you can interpret this as edges and low frequency feature and all those things. But for non-stationary signal, so because non-stationary signals are purely random signals, and in deep learning the weights are also random, so we cannot interpret all those features. So that is why, so if we consider the subband signals, so obviously we can interpret these weights are responsible for this frequency component. But for image processing tasks, the deep learning based features has some meaning, but for non-stationary signal processing, this has no meaning. So that is why, that is the main motivation to develop the multi-scale deep learning. At least we can localize these weights, or you can say these feature maps belongs to which frequency component. So directly if you apply, so again if you consider suppose different feature maps you obtain from the convolution layer, then evaluate FFT, So because that is purely random. If you again use FFT, so that will give a global frequency response. You cannot reveal that which frequency component the first feature map belongs to. So that is why, that is the main motivation to develop this multi-scale deep learning. So by combining both signal processing concept, signal decomposition, then also the deep learning. Yeah, for image processing concept, the feature maps has some meaning, like whether it is, yeah, exactly. So the good reference is, like, I will share a few papers after this talk. So first paper is like multi-scale deep learning recently we have developed. Then another network that we have considered, the time frequency domain deep learning. Like suppose we have one sound signal, like heart sound signal, or we have the speech signal. So we can obtain the time frequency matrix, time frequency image also we can consider. Now, once we have the time frequency image, so we can develop the deep neural network. So I will share 2-3 papers after this talk, or if you can email me, definitely I can share. Any other question?
Yes, any other questions, participants? Okay, so if there are no more questions, so yeah. So yes, any other questions? Okay, yeah, I hope there are no more questions. And yes, if you have any doubt in future, so of course you can mail to Dr. Rajesh. Okay, yeah, on behalf of the organizing team, I thank you, Dr. Rajesh, for finding time for us from your busiest schedule. So yeah, I'm sure that it was really an interesting talk, and yeah, participants also liked it. Yeah, I'm getting the feedback in my Google form. It's yeah, it's I can see a link. Very good explanation, interaction. Yeah, thank you for inviting such an enthusiastic expert, excellent session, informative session. Yeah, like it's so. Okay, yeah, thank you, Dr. Rajesh, for giving your time for us. Yeah, we are really lucky that we have you today with us. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Padi. So can I leave?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.